Thanks a lot for all being here, despite us having the last session of today. And of course, I would like to thank our panelists and the two keynote speakers again for being here and for the discussion. As you saw, it's a very important session because collaboration is key, international collaboration is key, and we can learn so much from each other. And personalized medicine is an entire chain. It's a changing of it's a concept, it's a changing of many aspects, how we are providing healthcare now, how we organize healthcare. So there are so many aspects to consider, so many stakeholders to be involved. So besides the two keynotes that were bringing us to Qatar and also to Africa, we are having 3 panelists that will bring additional perspectives in the panel discussion specifically. We would like to value, of course, also the individual work of the 3 panelists, additional panelists for this panel, and would like to give them the possibility to introduce themselves and their work. You find, by the way, I missed to mention it, the bios of our speakers also on the website, so I will be really brief to give you more time to introduce yourself and also the work you're doing. We are starting with Eline, who is working at the Institute of Health and Society at the University of Oslo. And you are really important because everything is about how much it costs. Is it really efficient and equity and possible for a healthcare system? But what is really the value? And we really feel that the work you're doing is really giving maybe a wide angle also in analyzing what does it bring for the society, for the healthcare professional, for the patient and the citizen. So, Eline, the floor is yours.
Much for the invitation to talk about health economics at this conference. That's a great pleasure. So I'm using this one, is it? The green one. So just to, so what I'm talking about is sort of accumulated experience over the last maybe 10 years. Current projects, finished projects, ongoing projects, together with EU-funded projects and Nordforsk-funded projects and local Norwegian-funded projects. So in addition to this, I'm also part of being part of the 1 Million Genome project, which is also continuing with the HTA package. So, so this is what I do as research. This is what I do as teaching. So as well. So I'm a health economist, and that's my perspective also on precision medicine. So I will talk a little bit about sort of what is our angle to this area. So as an economist or a health economist, it's about allocation of scarce resources. So also in this field, it's about how do we allocate the resources into precision medicine and the testing. Beyond that, it's also about distributional concerns. It would be about optimizing what the government would be interested in optimizing. So it could be also about distributional, and it is. It could also be about equal access. All of these are the concerns for a decision maker. So, so it's then several types of analysis, but one is then about efficiency. So it's about balancing health benefits and resource use, typically named as cost effectiveness analysis, which is then a part of an HTA health technology assessment, also used for, not in all countries, definitely not, but for many countries as part of a reimbursement decision. In addition, when we talk about, so this is about efficiency. In addition, there are other concerns such as distributional concerns that many countries also pay attention to, like severity, rarity, and it could be others like uncertainty components that we could take into consideration in a decision making. So based on this, after we've done a consideration about the efficiency and sort of if there are health benefit and the resources, it's about affordability. And then we will discuss then potentially the budget impact of implementing a new technology. And then, so how is the interaction between health economic and medicine then? It's several areas, but I will keep it to the cost effectiveness analysis framework for now and broaden it up at the end. So the challenge here is, of course, several, but it's about small patient populations. So there's about increased uncertainty to make judgment about the evidence, for instance. And we do testing to identify these, whether you have a biomarker. And what is interesting is it's not necessary to guide, only to guide treatment. Some of these decisions are also no treatment as an option. So when you have treatment, the additional discussion is about what is the value downstream of the treatment. But what are the decision and the value when there is no treatment option? It's the value of knowing, or what should be then sort of the valuation. And the latter is maybe more complex in the standard cost effectiveness framework, but nevertheless is an important thing to consider and is being considered. Yes, so I will talk about some challenges in evaluation of health benefits, or the value and the resource use. And I would say there's one main challenge, and they are caused by a couple of these addressed here. It's about deriving evidence that working with precision medicine provides improved health. So this is my key message. In addition, there's other considerations like ethical and regulatory challenges, of course, but we will, I guess, address those later as well. So what is a challenge? So we know we have small patient populations. There is the challenge that typically the evidence or the diagnostic new treatment is derived from single-arm trials. So this is a challenge because you have no control group. So what should it be compared with? So we need to think differently. And here sort of the use of registry data, external controls, expert opinion and hesitations are suggested as possible options. So for instance, Sahar is here, and in Primrose, there's a huge work on trying to identify synthetic controls on these off-label use in the drug-like trials, off-label use. How do we establish something that we compare to, so we can say that the treatment or this new pathway is improving health compared to standard of care? The second part is that since more and more published literature and EMA is approving now drugs at an earlier stage, we have more immature data. And immature data is in the middle part here, is that we have few observational primary endpoint. So we know not that much about survival or important outcomes. So why is this problematic? Yeah, this is problematic because when we are evaluating health benefits that are done in a lifetime horizon, so the extrapolation of long-term health benefits becomes uncertain. So here there's a need to develop methods and to work to understand whether we should make a decision today, because that's what we want. We want access to patients, or whether we can give conditional approval of new treatments and wait for more evidence. So to the right here, we have the framework of cost effectiveness analysis, which is for several countries being used. For some countries, cost is not a part, but the health benefit might be important. Here it's in the denominator, it's the extra health benefit of the new treatment. And it's here in quality adjusted life years, which is often recommended in several countries, definitely not all. And on the nominator, it's the differences in cost of the new treatment. So that includes everything of the cost of the diagnostics, the treatment, and downstream consequences of health and maybe societal cost, depending on guidelines. And for the effect, what is driving the effect is, of course, survival and adverse events. So what makes this challenging? And it is challenging in precision medicine. And it's because it's combining the evaluation of diagnostics or the genetic profiling and downstream consequences. So I try to illustrate this here by, and this you can read in the paper. This is, oh, it has changed, sorry. It didn't look, yeah, sorry. Doesn't look that good. So to the left, it's the diagnostics, and this is a case for prostate cancer, where you're comparing whole genome sequencing versus standard of care. So the driving mechanism here is that you by whole genome sequencing are identifying more actionable biomarkers. That's good. But in itself, that's not the value if you can't do anything about it. So this part is then combined with the long-term clinical benefits. So if you, so if you see here to the right, there's some examples of published literature on one of the treatments. So identifying the progression-free survival and overall survival for one of these treatment arms. So all these endpoints on the diagnostics is combined with clinical evidence on the long-term consequences. And then we combine this with the cost of the diagnostics and the cost of the treatment to evaluate whether this is cost-effective over a lifetime horizon. So this is how we do it. And this would be then for prostate cancer. But if you ask the question about what is the value of NGS, for instance, or whole genome sequencing, that's a very different story. So in this case, you could say we can use, for this, we could optimize the use of NGS or whole genome sequencing. It's not the same, whole genome sequencing for prostate cancer, and to say whether it should be used or not. But that's a very different, that is just one of the questions we can ask about these diagnostics. So if you broaden a bit up, we can think about what is value. So this is an old called the value flower from ICPER, published to sort of to identify different factors that could have a value. And if you look at the upper right corner, you have the green points that are typically part of an evaluation, which is this cost effectiveness framework. And then you have the light blue, that is the societal perspective. These are part of current evaluations. The dark blue ones are other considerations that are being discussed as being relevant, but not necessarily included. And here you can see it's equity, it's the value of hope, it's the value of knowing is also part of this, to just have a notion of whether you know that you have a certain disease, even though it's not something you can do about it. And severity is part of this framework, and the reduction in uncertainty. So what part of these values should be included is actually part of a discussion between politicians, decision makers. So I think this interaction when we work with precision medicine is cross-sectoral, and to discuss what should be part of a guideline in the evaluation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm happy because there were forms, but not as many and complex, what sometimes is a complexity for me to follow health economics, although it is very important. I would like to open it for a question. So we have a short time for question. There's one from Malin there.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm Malin Eklund from Sweden's Innovation Agency. So I have a question. So we've talked, you know, sometimes you hear, okay, it's too expensive, it's not going to work. And then the other argument is, okay, we can also avoid treating patients with the wrong. But it doesn't seem like we come to the conclusion or say, I would love to have that one pager, you know, that summarizes what's in it for society in sort of in a value health economic calculation. Are we close to having that, or?
So I think some of the examples that was shown as example from, for instance, Qatar earlier today, I think you could find that it's cost effective, and you would recommend it. So Kloppo, yeah, within, for instance, use of Valparin, to say that whole genome sequencing or NGS is cost effective in cancer care. You know that it is for certain subgroups, testing for genes, but overall, I think we're not there. So I think we should, because that takes a long time to understand really the value of NGS, because then you have to value all the options that comes downstream, and we don't know all about that yet. But we might know some guide decisions within some indications. Yeah. Maybe that was a passive answer, but I would not say yes yet. But
no, but of course that's what we all dream about, that you would also then go beyond genomics and you would also include prevention, sort of, if you find out how to prevent something, what's the value of that? But I understand, we're still working on that.
And I also think that there's not that many cases where you actually reduce treatment. I think most of the cases are new treatment options. So maybe when you have it, for instance, I know there's a case, at least in Norway, where they're trying to identify for stage 2, 3 colorectal cancer, to identify who's the high risk of recurrence. Then you talk about avoiding treatment or reducing treatment so that's sort of reducing over treatment. But you have to be certain about that these are good prognostic tools. Yeah.
Maybe one question for the international perspective. I'm happy to see that the blue parts are including a lot of what is important for the patient part also. How do you feel that these elements of value are dependent on the country?
So I think that most countries do, as part of the information, as part of the decision tool, is the cost effectiveness analysis, and then it varies between decision makers and country, which are the elements that are part of the decision. So there's been suggestion to have sort of multi-criteria to balance other components. But it's also complex to have that as a sort of you should wait. Yeah. I think they're kind of captured, like when they're drugs for rare conditions, governments are typically more willing to pay for these type of treatments than others, smaller patient groups, even though it's not explicitly stated. But you can, maybe I shouldn't say, but value of hope is a problematic one, because of course we can see the value of hope, but what is the value of loss? You always have another side of some of these components. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
You think? I don't know what that is. PALIS,
yeah. Productivity adjusted light years. Productivity adjusted light years.
Quality?
Not Qualis.
No,
PALIS. It is productivity adjusted life years.
Oh yeah.
So it's that use the part of societal perspective.
Yeah. So I think so that would so what I think about it. So in Norway we don't accept it. They're concerned about the distributional concerns, so that you would steer the investments towards people who are working in no. Okay, so then I don't okay.
It is using the societal perspective instead of the healthcare perspective.
Yeah, I know. Yes, yes. So I think yes, I understand. Yeah. So that's what I think about it. I think it's important to think about, since there's scarcity of personnel or generally people working, I think we should include productivity, but I think we should include a lot of other consequences as well, as environmental consequences and informal caregiving as well. So that was maybe my answer to that. Yeah.
Thank you, Eline. Thanks a lot. Great introduction into the topic, and a very important part when, of course, specifically when we are thinking about convincing policymakers. But another way is to start constructing initiatives on a local, national level. So we are coming to our next speaker, Kamal, who will present to us a specific example on how maybe to start in a country on a national level in a specific field. Why not also? And Maud will present to us PRISM, so the Institut Hospitalo-Universitaire It's a National Precision Medicine Center in Oncology at Gustave Roussy Center. So, Maud, please come. The floor is yours.
Okay, I think this is okay. So thank you, Monika, for this introduction, and thank you also, Matteo, for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. It's an honor to be able to present our new young institute. I will try to be brief, and I would be happy to take questions. Not okay? Better? Okay. So maybe quickly on my background, I have a background in molecular biology. I've been working in precision medicine for like 15 years now. I followed not actually implementation, but the start of implementation of precision oncology, starting with the trials, precision medicine trials, with the advent of next generation sequencing till now. So I'm going to try to give you a brief overview of our institute. Maybe can work. That, as Monika mentioned, is the Hospital University Institute. That is the National Precision Medicine Center in Oncology. And this is actually an example, even if it's at the regional level, of collaboration. So this institute is founded by 5 founding members. Gustave Roussy, where I come from, as the coordinating member. But the institute includes also Unicancer, the Federation of Comprehensive Cancer Centers in France, the School of Engineering Centrale Supélec, the University of Paris-Saclay, and INSEAD. So why this institute? We know today that precision medicine and precision oncology is a reality. And what we've been hearing till now is that the implementation is tricky. So we need to have more proof to be able to implement it, and we need more research. So what I'm presenting here is the way to have new strategies in precision medicine. And of course, we need to think about implementation. So we know that even if disease till now are classified by anatomical location, a lot of clinical trials till date, even with new drugs, are tested within these clinical trials. We know we've gathered a lot of data with the advent of next generation sequencing, as I mentioned, to prove that actually cancer is driven by a multi-dimensional biological mechanism. So our vision today is to be able to classify cancer at the individual scale. We need to go beyond the used clinical classification and even molecular classification by integrating different parameters of the patient as well as the ecosystem to talk about the new precision medicine and oncology today. And to be able to do that, we need to provide tools that recapitulate the cancer and the host biology at the level of each individual patient. So we need to develop new tools, but also simple tools that could be used at the global level and in a way that is possible in every single hospital. And of course, the idea is what we work all on is to be able to have an impact. So what we plan to do is to, of course, and this is, as I mentioned, important to everyone, to decrease mortality and the treatment burden and also the health disparities. So our aim is to support a scientific strategy to produce multidimensional portrait of cancer and the host to guide treatment, but also prevention. Our strategy is built on 4 different pillars that we consider the technical pillars, but we have also an education program that is really important. So we need to start from the basic science to the clinical practice, and we are still at the research part. So in terms of basic science, we are trying to work on each parameter of the cancer. Clonality, microenvironment, epigenetics, etc. And for that, we are trying to attract scientists, young scientists from everywhere to work on the different parameters. And the next step is to be able to integrate all these parameters in a global view of the cancer, of the patient, population to be able to better understand what's happening. And that is why the collaboration, the disciplinary collaboration are really key. And that is why we are working with 5 founding members that have different expertise. So for example, in that case, we rely on mathematicians. We use applied mathematics from our partners, the university and the School of Engineering, to be able to integrate all these aspects, of course, keeping in mind the clinical applicability. We are also trying to validate all of it in clinical study. So a third and main pillar is the clinical research. That goes in both ways, meaning that we need the data to implement and validate them in clinical studies, but we are trying to innovate and trying to set up clinical studies with new methodology, new platform studies in precision medicine, to be able as well to feed the basic science that we have around. And finally, our plan in 10 years is to be able to evaluate everything and to see if it makes sense to implement it. What's important for us, aside the educational program that I will not have time to mention, but one important point is that we need a new diploma. So we need to train a researcher, but as well clinicians, to be able to apprehend and to understand, for example, artificial intelligence, the complexity of the data. So we are trying to build a new diploma on that. And we started with one university diploma that is ongoing, actually. An important and last point that I wanted to mention is that we need to have tools to be able to do that. And that is why one of our major programs is to be able to use the data that we generate, but also have engineers that will provide tools to understand them. So the part of analysis, I mentioned 2 papers that the School of Engineering, for example, provided the clinician with tools to be able to better understand and interpret the data. And finally, because everyone talks about artificial intelligence, I wanted to mention that we are trying also to have a program on artificial intelligence. But our vision is a bit different. So, of course, we are, as I mentioned, producing a lot of data at the different parameters of cancer. So we want to create the optimal virtual twin of the patient by integrating the different data. But at the same time, we will rely, of course, on what is happening everywhere, the databases, the knowledge base that are public, and also the one that we are creating. And we are working on creating pipelines to analyze the molecular features, to create generative AI, to develop, generative AI that will allow us to individualize therapies. And with the aim to say that we are going to use AI or create new agents that will allow us to identify the right existing treatment or also the non-existing treatment that we need to develop. But all of it needs to be validated in clinical study. And we need to evaluate the efficacy of using AI and its clinical utility. And this needs to be proven yet. What's our ecosystem? What are we trying to do? So as I mentioned, this is a hospital university institute that is actually very young. It was launched in 2024. We are 18 months old, and we are actually funded by the government. It's a leverage funding from the government, that is France 2030, and it allows us to work on the infrastructure of the institute. So today, what we worked on for the 18 months is to set up the structure. We relied on specific teams and departments from the existing founding member, and we would like to double it. We started recruiting scientists on specific questions, and we have 4 new teams that were recruited till now. And the majority of the funding from the government will be used really for the infrastructure, to also work on developing our platform, and of course to be able to run our programs. We still need funding, and we've mentioned this also this afternoon. The question is always how to get funding. And we are located at Gustave Roussy, and actually within a hub that is developing now. So this is the new Paris campus. It's in the Paris region, and now we have a metro line 14, so you can easily come to visit. It was not the case a year ago. So why it's important to have a cancer campus? Because we need to have all the different stakeholders close by, even if now we work on, virtually a lot, but still, this is important. So we have the hospital, Gustave Roussy. We have the innovation quarter with a new biocluster in France dedicated to cancer with a lot of biotechnologies and startups that are here. We have the education, and we hopefully will be able to have a new building that will allow us to integrate our institute within this new building. So this is our campus that is dedicated to cancer, and it's ongoing, and the development is really very quick. And happy to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Maud. We are open for questions, of course. I maybe would like to start then, as long as the hands are rising. Maud, how we talk here about the last point was really important, I feel, for me, was the question of infrastructure. So the investment from national funding to build infrastructures, but with a long-term perspective of maybe self-sustainability also well. So how this is important, because sometimes when we are especially going to new countries or countries not yet thinking or starting to develop personalized medicine, sometimes external funding, for example, is not always helping to build something sustainable. So how important it is, you see this starting with a national budget for developing infrastructure for what is coming after?
So actually, this is a really important question, Monika, and it's we have this chance in France to be able to have this funding. What I wanted to mention is, of course, we have the funding from the government over 10 years. So this is a leverage funding, and the idea, yes, is to be sustainable afterwards. So this is a center of excellence in cancer, but the idea is to be able to be independent after 10 years. But to give you an idea, so the funding from the government is actually 10% of the actual global budget of the institute. What we've decided to do is to make sure that the funding from the government goes only for the infrastructure, meaning new platforms, having new teams, packages for the new teams, and new scientists that will arrive to be able to help them to be able to get grants, etc., so that they can move forward. And for all the programs or the functioning of the program, this is something that we go for other sources of funding, meaning grants, different types of grants, European grants as well. And of course, we have a lot of private public-private partnership. We work a lot with startups and pharma because they are interested in. I didn't get the chance because the lack of time to talk about main programs, but we have a lot of interest from the pharma to work with us on innovative treatment, for example, on the mechanism of actions on innovative treatments.
So again, the question sometimes the role of the private sector. And by the way, I'm not sure if you have mentioned it. Also, you are kind of an incubator. So you said you are very young, but aren't there already, at least if I have in mind, 2 startups that are, well,
actually, the startups maybe that you would like to mention, because as I mentioned in my last slide, so we are in a hub. It is a new cancer campus in the Paris region. And we have the biocluster that is also from the national funding. It's the same funding, France 2030. And actually, the idea of this biocluster, the Paris-Saclay Cancer Cluster, is to help startups. And we interact a lot with them. So we have a lot of collaborations.
So it is also an efficient use of innovation created in the own country through this kind of network.
Yeah, it shows the importance of having a cancer hub in Europe. And I think that many countries are also trying to have it. But it's important to have a multidisciplinary campus where we need, of course, to work also on public-private collaborations.
Great. I have the feeling your talk was very comprehensive, so there are no further questions. I think, Malin, thank you.
I think it's my chance again. So on the 4th of December, we are working on a test and demonstration call in ICPerMed. And during the preparation, we talked to some regions and, you know, asking a little bit, how do you test and sort of prepare for broader implementation? So on the 4th of December, Health Proof Helsinki will tell you more about how they've sort of integrated test environments close to the hospital research innovation. Is this something you thought about to have on your site?
So on the campus, as I mentioned, it's very important for us to have the education, and we have also teams that are working on epidemiology, and we have programs that are more socioeconomic programs, and we integrate all these endpoints to our clinical studies. So in the hub, yes, we have a research team working on that. And ideally, we have a program on implementation, but as I mentioned, we are 18 months old, so we are starting to integrate that, and this is actually a priority for us. So we are trying now. We have at Gustave Roussy a liquid biopsy screening program, and we started to try to see with other centers in France how this might impact, for example, the pathway of the patient, to see if it makes sense to implement it. And I mean, we know that it should be implemented, but at least to personalize it and see also the feedback from the patients on that. And our artificial intelligence program, for example, we have a patient advocates and patient representative that will work with us actually on the way we would like to also redefine what is artificial intelligence and virtual twin.
Thank you so much. Maud, don't. I wanted to know, what is the relation between?
INCA is the National Cancer Institute in France.
Yeah.
So INCA is, I mean, we get some money from INCA via grants, etc. And we are working closely with the INCA because we are really active in the new joint action on personalized medicine, joint action PCM, and we are leading the arm on prevention, personalized prevention. So yes, we work really closely with INCA with all of the programs that are related to precision medicine, and especially at with the interaction at the European part.
Thank you. And before we are coming to our next speaker, I would like to hand over to Matteo Matteo.
Yes, we have a very nice moment because we are awarding EU PRISM as best practice in personalized medicine. So I read for its contribution to the advancement of personalized cancer care in France through collaborative innovation. So
thank you so much. Thank you. This is really an honor. And actually, I just want to take a few seconds to say thank you again. And it's really important to work together at the European and international level, because otherwise the pace of movement is really slow.
Very good. So don't hesitate to share what you're doing with us. You might be awarded. We are coming to Ron. Please come already. Ron Schaik. And we thought about Ron for this panel because we talk about already research. We talk about how to communicate to policymakers, but how to implement. And we feel that you are working on the pharmacogenomic field that is already quite advanced, but despite the fact we have evidence, it's not everywhere implemented yet, accessible to the patient, but you are working hard on it. And yeah, we are looking forward to your perspective and how we can come from research to a reality for a patient and how to translate this from one country to the other.
Well, thank you so much. Quite a challenge. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. A little bit on my background. So I'm head of the Department of Clinical Chemistry in the Erasmus University Medical Center in Rotterdam. I'm also a professor in pharmacogenetics, and one of my main targets is to try to implement the research that was done on pharmacogenetics into clinical practice. And I've been working with that for over 25 years, so it's quite some time. One of the reasons that I'm also here, I think, is the fact that I'm founder and past president and current board member of the European Society of Pharmacogenetics and Personalized Therapy. We had like a major congress like a couple of weeks ago in Rotterdam, and the main target there, the main focus was also their implementation of pharmacogenetics in the different countries. For the rest, I'm also like, we have like a website of pharmacogenetics.nl, so it's a general website for the public, and I will discuss that a little bit later. Like I said, the implementation of pharmacogenetics, how to get things into clinical practice, is quite a challenge. And there are several or many groups that are working on this. And I'm in fact a member of all these groups. So trying to harmonize as much as possible. It's not that I have that much time, but I'm just afraid that everybody will come up with different guidelines. So we have like the Association for Molecular Pathology, and we have guidelines, what is the SNPs or the alleles that should be tested, like as a minimal set. The Clinical Pharmacogenetics Implementation Consortium, CPIC, makes guidelines, clinical guidelines, how to translate the genomic information on pharmacogenetics into dosing advices. And also the Dutch Pharmacogenetics Working Group from the KNMP is also working on these specific guidelines. So you can see there's a lot of initiatives ongoing there. So how did we work that with the clinical implementation? I want to go back to when I started. And that was like in 1998 already, realizing that if a doctor sees a patient, you know, if you see two patients that have the same problems, the same challenges, and then you prescribe them the same drug, and then something happens that I think a lot of clinicians will recognize, that one patient does very well on the drug and the other patient has all kinds of side effects. So this is more or less a given, and usually we think that, okay, if we can treat 80% of the patients in the right way, then it's a little bit a pity for the 20% other patients, but let's move on. But we can increase that, increase the effectivity there. And one of the challenges at that time, or the outcomes of a study in 1998, was the fact that it was shown that 5 to 7% of hospitalizations is in fact due to adverse drug reactions. So this was the challenge at the time that I was starting. How can we predict this inter-individual variation in drug metabolism? Of course, if you are like a poor metabolizer, you will have on the same dose a high drug concentration in the blood, and therefore a higher risk on adverse drug reactions. And the ultra-rapid metabolizers, they will not receive effective therapy. So what we did at that time is kind of bottom-up approach. So I reasoned like, okay, there is this particular paper there, pharmacogenetics, a laboratory tool for optimizing drug therapy. So we just set out to set up the first test. And we thought at that time that cytochrome 2D6 was the most easy one. Well, it's not the case. It's one of the most complex one. But we actually wanted to see, we should first have the test available before we can move on. So you can see here me doing very important work in the lab, just opening the lid of the machine there so that the technician can actually do the real work. And we started like with 25 patients in 2005, 25 patients a year. And last year we were up to 35,000 tests representing 25,000 patients per year that are actually getting pharmacogenetic information on a diagnostic level so that they can be treated. And we did not do that alone in the Netherlands. So one of the things which is also important here is collaboration. So we set up a network in the Netherlands. There are like 16 ISO 15189 certified laboratories that are currently providing pharmacogenetic services. And I set up like a network that we come together like once a year to make sure that we are harmonized, that we are doing the same type of test, that the interpretation is also the same. So starting from that in the Netherlands, of course, you want to know what can you do with that information. So that was the next challenge. And in 2005, you can see here, by the way, a joke in the New York in 2000, somebody going to the pharmacist, handing over the DNA information and stating, can I have the drugs according to my DNA profile? Well, we set up the Dutch Pharmacogenetic Working Group, the DPWG, and with 15 people, we set out to have evidence-based dosing guidelines. That means that like every 3 months we get together, there was a huge pile of literature that we had to go through. And in a systematic way, we looked at the evidence and the clinical effect. And if that was sufficient, important, then we did the dose calculation, what should be given to patients if they have a specific variant. So with this information, we spread out in a national way. Of course, like the Dutch Pharmacy Association is a national initiative. And these guidelines were then accessible for every pharmacist in the Netherlands. Doesn't matter how small the town is, every pharmacist knew at a certain moment how to adjust the dose based on DNA information. I think that's quite unique. And I think currently we're still the only country worldwide where that is possible. And you can see me here trying that in my local pharmacy because I have been telling this and I thought I should check that for you as well. I went to my local pharmacist and said, okay, I'm depressed. I need an antidepressant. Here is my DNA information. I'm a 2D6 poor metabolizer. And indeed, he came up with the fact that I need only 30% the standard dose. And he could register that so that if I come back in 5 years for my metoprolol, they also know that, hey, this patient needs to have a different dose. So it's implemented in the Netherlands, and the only sad thing was that I had to tell her that it was in the computer, because then she had to look it up. But now she knows, and in that way, she learned something from me as well. I just made sure also that in my own hospital that was also accessible, because you tell this story everywhere in the Netherlands and outside. So I also at a certain moment went to my own hospital, said, okay, here's my DNA passport for medication, just to see if they knew what to do with it. And she immediately went into her computer and gave me the same dosing advice. And I told her my compliments, because your colleague a couple of weeks ago, I had to tell it was in his computer. And then she said, but I attended your lecture like 2 weeks ago, so that's why I remember. And I realized that's the key. We should do work on education. It should be known where you can find that information. So from that, this is currently from the Dutch Pharmacogenetic Working Group. Every pharmacist has for 60 drugs and 18 genes the information how to dose based on genetic variants in these particular genes. So this is how we came across in the Netherlands. Going further from that, you want to educate people. So education, already mentioned earlier, is very important. So we had like the pharmacists. You can see here a little classroom of 1,500 pharmacists that we were educating together with my colleague from Leiden, but also continuing that with e-learnings, congresses, symposia. We are teaching also the medical specialists, the general practitioners, together with Martina Cornell also here in the audience, teaching them about genetics and pharmacogenetics. Medical students implemented in the general and specialized teaching programs as well. And we created a website also for the general public, but also for the GPs and the specialists to look at what is pharmacogenetics and which genes can be assessed there. And like I said, to go from there, you want to extend that even further. So you want to know for the laboratories, which is the minimal set of variants that you should investigate if a 2D6 analysis is requested. So that's from the Association for Molecular Pathology. So we have for at least 8 genes now established what are the tier 1 alleles that you should minimally investigate, and also the tier 2, which are nice to have, which have some clinical importance. But you also want to have the guidelines, so the Clinical Pharmacogenetic Implementation Consortium and the Dutch Pharmacogenetic Working Group providing guidelines how to translate the genotype information into a dosing advice. And of course, the next step is even more important. How do you get it into clinical guidelines? And currently, the European Society of Cardiology has adapted, for instance, the guidelines for 2C19 genotyping for clopidogrel. And I think that's quite an achievement. They were like 10 years after that the EMA had, in fact, a warning into the SMPC. So it was a little bit late, but it's in the guideline now. And also the European Society of Medical Oncology has now guidance for DPYD testing for capecitabine, and that took only like 2 years. So there could be some difference there. And just to indicate you that sometimes it's quite bothersome to get it into the guidelines, the psychiatry, we started with the Dutch Pharmacogenetic Working Group. We had in 2005 specific guidelines how to adjust antidepressant dosing based on the genotype. The pharmacogenetic guidelines for psychiatry came out in 2020 with exactly the same recommendations. So on one hand, that's nice, but it was like 15 years later after we first had the first dose recommendations. So sometimes you have to have some patience before it's in clinical guidelines. Having this said about the Netherlands, of course, we want to expand that. So we founded in 2011 the European Society of Pharmacogenomics and Personalized Therapy. And the aims are, I think, very much the same as I saw here for ICPerMed. Support clinical implementation at the national and clinical laboratory level, stimulate the exchange between stakeholders, facilitating research, providing and structuring education, and serving as a partner for industry and regulators. So I think that's very much matching, it's indeed with the ICPerMed. We are about like 600 members in that society. And you can see here that we have research group, corporate members, individual members, national societies there. And we have set it up in divisions. Like I said, clinical implementation is one, and you can see on the right-hand side that we had at that time a European Pharmacogenetics Implementation Consortium with like 19 European countries and 24 pharmacogenetic laboratories in which we try to learn from each other and to expand how can we do clinical implementation of pharmacogenetics. And of course, education as well. We organized summer schools, as you can see, in 2012 to 2020 in different cities. And also we have tried to have research groups together. On that particular aspect, I think one of the most important parts of this ESPT is to bring people together. So we had also congresses biannual. We started in Bled, and we had it in Lisbon, Budapest, Catania, Seville, Belgrade. And like in 2023, we had it in Copenhagen, and we had an attendance of 242 participants from 35 countries, and 85 accepted posters. So you can see that there's really a community growing there, because it's not limited to one specific medical field. It's all across like cardiology, oncology, psychiatry, pediatrics, transplantation medicine. And like I said, just a couple of weeks ago, we had the follow-up meeting in Rotterdam, and I'm very proud to say that we even had like 514 participants, 42 countries were present, and we had like 160 posters. So I think this is really a community that is growing and where we can have exchange of information. And if you look then at a very important paper that came out in 2023, was already mentioned earlier, the UPGX, ubiquitous pharmacogenomics paper that came out in Lancet Oncology, showing indeed that the 12-gene pharmacogenetic panel could lead to a 30% reduction in adverse drug reactions. Because that was the question that we were getting every time. Where is the evidence? Can you show us the evidence that there is a reduction in adverse drug reactions? I think this particular project was there a very good indication of that. So I think from that, as I learned also, European-initiated pharmacogenetic implementation projects, sometimes from the government as well. But I know the NHS in England is working on that. Scotland has an implementation program. With Denmark, there's talks with the government there as well. I saw from Norway a couple of weeks ago when I was on the meeting there that they already have some kind of guidance how they want to implement it. In Spain, it's already integrated into healthcare. Again, in the Netherlands, we just received an additional 2.6 million euros for a project for implementations for GPs. Because we find that the GP, we think that the most value of a pharmacogenetic passport will be within the GPs, also to prevent that patients have to go to second line or third line care. And also in Finland, I'm not sure if that's a national initiative, but there's a lot of pharmacogenetics ongoing there in the Helsinki University Medical Center. And also at the ESPT, there were some data in the first 10,000 patients on that hospital that were genotyped with a panel. So you can see that all across Europe, we're now learning from each other, and in that way, getting more and more implementation. And I think that's what I wanted to share with you, and hopefully we can work together more with ICPerMed. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ron. Question from the audience to Ron. There is one from BBMRI. I already spoil.
For my passion, actually. Very nice work. My question is related to how much is microbiome being considered in the...
Microbiome?
Yes, on the influence of pharmacogenomics.
You're totally free to pick up on that subject. I decided to stay with the pharmacogenetics. No, like I said, the pharmacogenetics is just one item. We still have like underlying disease, epigenetics was mentioned already, kidney function, microbiome is also there. So I think that should all be parts of the puzzle. But I decided to focus on the pharmacogenetics, but you're perfectly free in the next time to comment on the microbiome. Very good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Astrid, right? Or is there another question? Okay, go ahead. I didn't see.
Okay, hello. Liisa-Maria Voipio-Fulkki, the retired Chief Medical Officer from Finland.
Yes.
Thanks for mentioning Finland. In my previous position, I was a strong proponent for pharmacogenomics for years. I just noted, I'm an ex-cardiologist, and that's why I'm very happy to see that the European Society of Cardiology has now implemented this in the guidelines. So that's the way to go. Exactly. And what I saw was that in the Finnish university hospitals immediately, more or less, when this recommendation came out, they were implemented in the national clinical care guidelines, and now they take place. Every single acute coronary syndrome patient that comes to at least to the Helsinki University Hospital, which I follow closely, gets this test done and recorded in the patient charts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I think that's very important.
I cannot help going back to the tamoxifen issue because letrozole and other aromatase inhibitors have replaced tamoxifen more than 10 years ago. So that is sort of, sometimes we can even abolish genomic testing if there is a new therapy that doesn't need it.
Yes, okay, that's a good point. That's always the question, but we see that tamoxifen is still very much prescribed. And I was given the information that the side effects on tamoxifen is less as with the aromatase inhibitors. So as long as clinicians prescribe tamoxifen, we want to help them with doing the genotyping. I think that's the answer I would like to give.
Okay, one last question to Ron before we go to the panel, Astrid.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting work, of course. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, if you take your card to the pharmacy, can the pharmacist change the dose, or is that the competence of the medical doctor and you have to go back?
Very good question. I get that question a lot. So the principle, at least in the Netherlands, is that the pharmacist cannot change the dose. They can advise the prescriber, like, okay, there's a pharmacogenetic test available to adjust the dose, or there's a pharmacogenetic result that makes that a different dose for this patient is there. So the pharmacist cannot change the dose. They should advise the prescriber.
So then is there a communication with the GP or whatever?
Usually there is, but it's not 100% as I understood. Okay, so that depends a bit, but there should be like a regular communication because the patients usually have their own pharmacist and a group of GPs is consulting with the pharmacist like every 3 months. So they get together, it's mandatory to exchange information on the patient. And there is like a regular connection between the GPs and pharmacists.
Okay, so that's a very, very important link.
Yes, yeah, because usually you have your own pharmacy, so it's not that you can go anywhere.
Yeah, Martina was also telling a little bit about this.
Oh, you had some extra information there.
The other question is, are your GPs already educated regarding pharmacogenetics or pharmacogenomics, or are you planning to do that? And how is that going? And how much are you educating them?
Okay.
I mean, how deeply?
Yeah, so every new GP in training gets 1 day pharmacogenetics. So all the new GPs should learn that. And we started in 2018. So we're now like, a couple of years further. So hopefully it will go in there. I also get invitations on like all kind of GP conferences, but also like we have this so-called FTO group. So this is the combination of usually like 3-4 pharmacists and like 10 to 15 GPs that come together like every 3 months to discuss. So I usually get invited, and also my colleague from Leiden and my colleagues from Amsterdam get invited to these meetings. And actually the first time that I was teaching for GPs, I thought that, okay, I can have this presentation for 2 years and then it's outdated. But every time that I give this presentation, everybody in the audience says, oh, I didn't know this. So apparently there are a lot of GPs that still want to have this training, but I'm pretty sure that there will be more and more knowledge in there.
And you feel that's sufficient?
Yeah, well, one of the projects that we're now having, this 2.6 million euro project, is specifically for GPs. So we are setting up also the whole infrastructure, also for the teaching from the GPs. How do you request the test? How do you interpret the test? What can you do with it? So that's now a big national project, which we do together with the Amsterdam University Medical Center, with Leiden University Medical Center, and with the Radboud. So in that way, we hope to give an extra boost to the knowledge among GPs about pharmacogenetics.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. So we will continue in the panel. So please be comfortable, take your seat. And I know there are other questions and you can address them to the panel, but we would like to open up a little bit the discussion to the entire panel, also including our 2 keynote speakers. And we would like to focus, in fact, on let's say 5 major aspects of discussion. And also if you have questions, if you could relate them to them, it would be wonderful. Of course, cross-border collaboration, this is why we are here, international collaboration, discipline also collaboration, and between different societies or initiatives also. So thinking also about the national initiatives or different medical societies. So also opening up maybe to that one. Scale up. So we start small, we go bigger, we go from one country to the other. Equity and access, a very important point we would like to discuss. Social perspective. So does it concern everyone? Is everyone feeling the same about it? Is it accessible for everyone? Acceptable? And also maybe to discuss, looking how we have time, about maybe prevention versus therapy also. Maybe before we are going to the different discussion points, I would like to activate the audience very rapidly with 2 in real Mentimeter questions without a Mentimeter, just with a hand up. Who is working in an international collaboration initiative currently now? Less than I thought, but Many. So there is a real importance with it. And how many from you, this is maybe the more personal question, how many it's access to technology or a therapy? Please lift your hand if you feel that your healthcare is already personalized. I'm happy to see. Exactly. We are working on it. And I think this is what we can, why we are also here to discuss, because it might be only possible if we are working together, because alone it is a hard way to go and we can learn from each other. So to see the public is eager to discuss and to listen also to the different points. So the first question to you, we have, I will share my micro and I will go for another one. But maybe we can start from Michèle and come to Hamdi. From your perspective, cross-border collaboration, how important is it, specifically from your point of view? And, oh, thank you so much. Where maybe we need to focus on research, innovation, implementation, on everything, where to start? So, Michèle.
So that's the million-dollar question, is where to start, because there's so much that needs to be done. I think cross-border collaboration is really important, but it's very hard to do. And, you know, I think we also don't, within countries, have enough resources and, you know, sort of collaboration amongst ourselves in terms of different disciplines. So I think for personalized medicine, you know, as we've just learned, you know, it's not about doing the research and having the proof of principle of what can be done. It's making sure that it can be implemented and that all the different sectors know about it. So that can only be done in country. So I'm very interested about how it's being rolled out in different countries, but every country has their own challenges in terms of how they do it, but we can learn from one another. So the cross-border collaboration is important for that learning and knowing where to start. So I think for me, that's very important. Thank you.
So following what Michèle is saying, it's not easy to answer this question. What is true is that in research, this is, of course, necessary. Because, of course, we need to start little, but we already know, I mean, in our case, that we cannot work alone. To be able to have precision oncology, and if I'm talking about my field, then definitely it's a workflow that starts with the patients and go back to the patient, but this is a multidisciplinary approach. Education is important. And education is also important at a different level, not only in a specific country, because it's important, as Michèle said, that we learn and we do a mapping of what's existing elsewhere, not to try to create the wheel every time. So it's important to see if we can get help across countries. The second part that is related to research and clinical research, hopefully that methodology can change, and I'm really not an expert in that field, but it's also important to be able, whenever we're talking about innovative drugs, to be able to test this drug globally. We've understood from Michèle's presentation as well that the genetic background is also important in the efficacy of specific therapy. So that is why we really need to do the validation across country, if I'm talking to research. Technology, this is also another story. Some countries are like more keen in new technologies. Artificial intelligence is going broader everywhere, but we need to learn from the expertise, not only in the specific domain across countries, but also in different fields, because this can help us make sense and better interpret the results that we have, even if it's in a specific field and a specific country. And in terms of implementation, and this is what we all want to achieve, it's really important to learn from everyone. We've started, and I'm talking again about the initiatives in Europe. In Europe, we are trying to do it across border inside Europe with, for example, the joint action on personalized medicine, where we want to see how precision medicine is implemented, for example, by the setting up of molecular tumor board on specific indications, maybe, but this is across country that will allow us to learn better of other cases from the different countries, but also try to help patients, leading to equities at least and equal access.
Yes. So I think collaboration is important between disciplines and between sectors and between countries. And I think yeah, so from this, so as an example, in Ascertain, an EU-funded project, we are working with enabling decision-making of what to invest in and not to invest, whether to not to invest in technologies. And I think then we can use knowledge and infrastructure for countries that has sort of, like for HTA, systems of modeling and decision-making, and we are creating open access models to enable decision-making in countries that has less developed HTA bodies to make decision-making. And I think this would not happen if it was not several countries involved and several stakeholders from different countries also involved to make these models enabling decision-making relevant for decision makers. Yeah, so that's from the more health economics perspective. Yeah.
Perfect. And maybe Ron.
Okay.
Because
yeah, so I think that I can indeed state as well, like collaboration is very important. It did trigger me a little bit to think about like the 2C19 genotyping for the clopidogrel. Like I said, the EMA had like this warning already in 2011, 2012. But the European Society of Cardiology in 2015 still stated that they thought that there was not enough evidence to implement 2C19 genotyping. That recommendation that came only in 2019, so 4 years later. But in the period between 2015 and 2019, at least in the cardiologists in the Netherlands, I saw that some hospitals had implemented, so they followed the EMA advice, and others did not. So even within one clinical discipline for one gene and one drug, there could still be a need to have more harmonization in the country. So happily enough, that's now there. But I'm still quite surprised also if I look to other countries. So now it's in the neurology, so for stroke, again, 2C19 clopidogrel. In the UK, it's more or less accepted that you should test for that. In the Netherlands, they're still discussing it, and there are other countries in where it's not completely implemented. So even again, one discipline, one drug, and one specific gene, that could be quite a challenge. So this is like a lot of like one gene, one drug, but then we're talking also about if you do the analysis, why should you just do one? Why not preemptive and have a DNA passport or multiple genes? So also for that knowledge to collaborate between countries, you hope that if it's implemented or that one country starts, that other countries will learn from that and also follow that particular example. So, and that's also what we try to do with the ESPT, to spread that knowledge and that you can have an uptake on the different countries. But hopefully, in the end, everybody in each clinical discipline will feel the same about a specific pharmacogenetic test.
Yes, so I can, if I can add, so I can say that for cross-border collaborations, we have started initially, our biobank was inspired by UK Biobank and the work that has been done in the UK. And now, as I mentioned in my talk, we are trying to help other countries to set up their biobanks and to get inspired from us. In terms of research, numbers still matters. It's, of course, you do genetic research on 1,000. It's not the same like you do it on 100,000. And joining efforts with other large-scale biobank and genomes is very important for discoveries. And we have been successful by joining large-scale consortia. And what we want to do now is to collaborate within the region, because still we collaborate with Europe, with the US, with Canada, but still within the Gulf region, the collaboration is not yet initiated, and we hope in the near future to establish a GCC or a MENA consortium working on common questions to bring this underrepresentation further in the genetic research map.
Thank you. So the point you're mentioning is also the question on scale-up. Scale-up could be within a country. Scale-up could be between, for example, neighboring countries, one country to the other. We discussed this a lot on Africa. Taking the neighbor on the boat, developing excellence centers, maybe even cross-border, or even, well, to bring in an entire region, so country by country, or bring in an entire region to collaborate. I think Europe, we don't have now here bigger countries like China, US, we have Canada here, but there are some, maybe the population is less than, for example, in China. So there are maybe some countries that have the possibility they don't need to collaborate. but we have to. I think especially Europe, but also globally with Africa, with the Middle East. So I think we should collaborate more. But there's a need to collaborate. Maybe just an open question to you and who would like to answer. So how we can scale up from where to start? Is it one reference center? Is it a national program? Then afterwards, is it between neighboring countries? So how is your feeling with maybe good incentives, maybe challenges or good practices? Can you share something that you feel that was working very good and I would recommend it? How can we learn from one maybe disease field and implement it to another? Yeah, so maybe where do you feel, an open question, where do you feel maybe here ICPerMed as a partnership, maybe supporting or ICPerMed or the policy level, supporting aspects in this regard? Open question, who would like maybe to say something? Maud?
Yes, I can try. So I think ICPerMed and ICPerMed really helping the community, and beyond the networking, of course, is the possibility to help emergent programs and questions related to precision medicine. What's interesting in this community from my side is the fact that it's really beyond a specific disease. So this is really important, allowing us to learn from other diseases, as you mentioned. And I think this is really relevant for the infrastructures and the workflow, because even if the different sections or part in a patient workflow, depending on the disease, are not the same, but I think that we can capitalize on the different experience to see if it's feasible in a specific field, then take some home messages to see if we can implement it. So I think, just not to repeat myself, but to say that what is really rich here is actually the fact that this community is thinking about precision medicine, but without a specific field. So by definition, it's open. So that's why we can learn from each other.
Thank you. Any other comment for this regard? Michèle?
I think I'll make maybe a comment on, it's very hard to implement and to scale. And we need more entrepreneurs who will actually take, individual ideas and scale them. So I'm wondering how we can incentivize through ICPerMed or ICPerMed young entrepreneurs to translate something in a country, for example, and really bring it to the fore. So I think we really, in Africa, need those success stories of like individual diseases that can really show people just how much it can do. So that area of support, I think, would be wonderful.
Thank you. We take note. Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, think about, you said like a reference center is quite important. I think that when we started, it was one of the topics also. Should we combine everything in one reference center? But if you look for the implementation of this pharmacogenetics, we reasoned that it's much nicer that local labs in their own hospital take that up and we teach them, because they are in contact with the clinicians. And in the end, it's the clinician that has to order the test. So in order to facilitate that, we said that you should spread the knowledge and to have like a larger network. Of course, you need then a reference center as a backup, but to have like to spread that information. I think it's the same with the countries. Also, you should not have to set one country that could be the reference center for the rest of Europe. Perhaps it's more cost effective or cost efficient. But I think to convince the local clinicians to adapt it and to try this, I think you should spread the knowledge and have like small centers in there that also work on this. So that's a little bit my vision on how to spread the knowledge and to create the uptake.
Eline?
Yes, I was also thinking about that when you launch new programs, you could also think about that these are elements for evaluation. Equal access, for instance, and that things are, when you apply for funding, this is something you should consider, but also representative or between areas, not, so these could be conditions in that. And another thing is maybe also to align with ongoing processes in EU. So for instance, with drugs, you have the joint clinical assessment now for improvements, and there are other regulatory yeah, so that the projects are ensured to be coming to a decision-making point that are being implemented. So that's not for the whole, all of this area, but I think these are also important things to align to.
Thank you. Hamdi?
I just want to give two examples of scaling up and validation. One for research. We have developed polygenetic scores for type 1 diabetes, and we have discovered in our samples, but we do need validation cohort, and we cannot validate on European cohort or Asian cohort. We need to have Middle Eastern ancestry cohort, and we are approaching neighbor countries for this. And on the clinical side, we started the clinical trials that I mentioned. We started with the Heart Hospital on clopidogrel and warfarin, but now we are scaling up to other hospitals because clinicians want also to implement this within their hospital.
That's good. So there's a demand also from the healthcare side. Just to open up, we have, of course, some points we would like to tackle, but to open it up, if there are questions, we don't want to exclude you. You are active participants in the discussion. So if you had still a question from the individual talks before, or a question specifically, well, that you would like to address even to the entire panel, please do so. Yes, we have another infrastructure approaching you.
Yes, very nice to be here. I'm Manuela Oldoni from EATRIS, the European Infrastructure for Translational Medicine. And I was triggered this morning and also from your conversation also about prevention. So I'm wondering, what do you think about developing preventive pathway and how to do so in order to leverage also all the data about risk stratification, risk to common disease, but also to chronic disease. And also from an economic point of view, I think this might be a nice conversation because it's difficult to assess the return investment of it, let's say. So yeah, it's an open question. Would like to share with me your thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, addressing. So I think so in evaluation or my field, we do a lot of simulation modeling. So I think it's actually a potential and underused potential to model these scenarios. So how could preventing activities within conditions influence long-term outcomes for patients and resource utilization? So I think that's that would be a very interesting case to look at and simulate potential preventive measures that is possible within precision medicine. So and then you can, based on that, that's sort of early HCA often called, you can also say how much could we invest in this to achieve such technologies. So I think that's possible also without evidence, but trying to derive knowledge about it. Yeah.
I can quickly add on this, but in the field of oncology, so we know today, it's working? Okay. So we know today that the prevention in cancer is really very important. Of course, we have several levels of prevention, primary, secondary, and tertiary that should be considered. But I want to talk about primary prevention. I think this is really important because today we have a lot of parameters that are changing. And within our center, what we're trying to do is to put in place programs related to prevention in oncology, but also what we call interception. So the idea is working on big clinical studies to collect the maximum of samples like saliva, blood, etc., and to see if there are any parameters, any markers that could lead us to see if there's an evolution of specific of a cancer also towards progression, and to see if we can intercept, so meaning that to modify the pathway of the patient to better treat that. And of course, by collecting a lot of data, there's the possibility also to see the impact economically on that. But of course, this is really important. And I think in oncology, this is the major question that is ongoing, at least at the European level. And this is part of the European Beating Cancer Plan.
The discussion about, just a follow-up point, just discussion about prevention versus therapy also gives it's a question on currently we are not investing a lot in prevention. So I mean compared to other activities. So I was just wondering, is it a question because we don't see yet the benefit so much because it's potentially too expensive because we don't know, maybe the diagnostic already costs. So, and especially prevention is really a question on accessibility. There we are really going towards a point where really the equity and access is very different between different countries all over the globe. Because we are often, when we are having issues with costs, we are treating where there's urgency. So it brings us to the question of equity and access a little bit. And I would like to know from every one of you, you can pick a point that you feel maybe the most important, but there are different points where we have to consider and think about equity and access during the development of personalized medicine approaches, the data, the infrastructure availability, so already starting to develop personalized medicine approaches. The validation process, is it applicable in different settings or only in my setting of the data I'm using to generate the personalized medicine approach? The accessibility, new technologies, maybe locally accessible also. The question of implementation with the diversity of healthcare systems, budgetary constraints, again, is it for the rich, for the poor, is it for everyone? How can we, maybe people have to know also the knowledge of the individual to get access. And then, of course, the different country specificities. So there are different points, but it would be great if every one of you could give your perspective on where we are with access and equity and how we can, and where should we really work on to make this maybe more accessible and the access, to create more equity here. Okay, I don't know who would like to start. Maybe we start on the left side this time. Hamdi.
Yes, so I can tell from Qatar experience, the infrastructure is very important because this is how we were going fast and being ready when, for example, COVID came. We were ready with the sequencing of the virus, with the host sequencing, with sharing the data across different stakeholders, ministries, hospitals, collecting this data. So infrastructure is an important point as a starting point, I see, for equity. And then technology and access to technology, this developed very quickly, and it can be, it's not a limiting point. I mean, if you have the infrastructure with the technology, you can start small and then scale up, as we said. But infrastructure, I would say, is very important.
Okay, so this is a discussion that I usually have with Ms. Martina about access. So in the Netherlands, the pharmacogenetic testing is, in fact, when it's asked for, requested by GP, it's reimbursed. So in that way, it should facilitate equity and access. However, the first 385 euros patients have to pay out of pocket. So that means that there is still a difference there. So a lot of GPs also worry about their patients if they can pay that. On the other hand, if you're looking at depressed patients or like with stroke or whatever, they already use that 385. So then the cost of the pharmacogenetic tests does not get to the patient itself. So then you have, again, equal access there. So it's a bit half-half. So if you don't have any medical condition, then you may have to pay the 385 euro. That means that you do not have equal access. But once you are in a disease process for which medication is needed, then at least insurance companies will cover the cost of the pharmacogenetic testing.
Yeah, so I think it's from the European perspective as well as I think equal access is one of the core values. I think, as I said, this could be part of your call, but I think national pipelines and national initiatives that coordinate how you set up a system of both the treatment pipelines, but also maybe the reimbursement. And of course, then that is very problematic because different countries have very different way of financing their healthcare system. But I think that is important, national initiatives that ensure these values. And then it's easy from a Norwegian perspective that has everything organized from a national level to say that this is easy, but I think, or it's easier because the way it's structured, but I think it's easy, very important to emphasize I think that's the only way to ensure equal access.
Okay, so I'm going to focus maybe on the access to screening, but let's say, I'll take the example of the National Initiative on Genomic Testing in France, France Genomic, and I think that to be able to really give access, by definition, actually, the launch of this initiative was to give access to everyone in France to genomic testing, whole genome sequencing, whole exome sequencing, to identify molecular alterations that could help clinicians to give a specific treatment in cancer. And actually, the huge work was done on infrastructure, and it was included in the health pathway of the patient. So this was something integrated in the clinical routine. However, I mean, I don't have the data because the medical economic analysis is still ongoing, but what we can see is that even if the infrastructure was built, a lot of regions, for example, did not include a lot of patients in this initiative. It was free, but because they didn't have the material, for example, because the clinicians were not aware of this initiative, even if they were aware, it was really complicated because they needed to have some logistics that was not available. So I think awareness is really important. So training the clinicians everywhere to move forward and to apprehend the new technologies and the development is important, but also the dissemination towards the general public and the patients is also important because the patients need to also be aware that there's a specific screening program somewhere. So I think key is the dissemination and the training of the healthcare providers.
I think those are all wonderful points. And I think when we think of the African perspective, there's so little, how do you even think about equity and access? The one question was, if you have common diseases and you want to do population risk stratification, because that can inform where you intervene. So if with a polygenic score, you're in the top 1%, you have early surveillance. And that is, I think, a reality in many European countries. But it's not something we can translate or bring to Africa, because if we don't have the large cohorts that enable us to develop a risk score that is appropriate for Africa, we cannot implement it. So you can't even think about access when you don't have the basic research and the data to actually understand what is important. So I think, we have a deficit at so many different levels. It's not only the research, it's also the whole infrastructure. It is about teaching the healthcare providers. It's about also creating awareness in the populace about, what needs to be done. So if we are going to have national genome projects, we have to start with a national dialogue. We have to create awareness, of the fact that this is available in the world. Because in some African countries, there are people who are rich enough to go to any place in the world to do things, but they're very few. So who we want to reach are those 5.6 million people with sickle cell anemia, for example. So I think it's very hard to think about equity, and it's very hard to think about access in a context where you have so little data. So, I'm a great proponent of data, but that's not the only thing. It's the whole ecosystem that needs to adapt. And I think there's still very little awareness amongst our medical practitioners because they're so overburdened in terms of their work dealing with infectious diseases. Now, more and more with multiple chronic conditions. And really, there aren't guidelines in terms of precision medicine, which will help inform how they treat better. So we do need, people to be looking at that from an African perspective as well.
Thank you all. Yes, because I was.
You were about to close. Okay, I will make it short. Yeah.
You can help me with the closing words.
Oh, right, really. No, I was just thinking of all the initiatives and to have the equity there. There are like commercial companies also like offering pharmacogenetic testing, but in that way you push it into like only the people that can afford it will indeed will be able to have access to that data. So I think it should really be more like a government or a healthcare perspective that you should promote this. And I know that in Spain it's already implemented in the healthcare system. So every patient there that wants to have a pharmacogenetic passport can have one. And as I understood, that's no additional cost there. And in the UK, they're now screening, I think, for the newborn screening, the whole genome sequencing. So also there, also the pharmacogenetic information would already be available. So that would ensure the equity here.
So we have to talk about it. We have to communicate.
We have to learn from them. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much. I wanted to close, but we have one
final question. So talking about equity and access, one subject that I was missing today was personalized pediatric medicine. We have recently done analysis of off-label use in the Netherlands, and off-label use in cancer among adults is about 30%. Among children is more than 50%. And for adults, it's just using for another indication. It's not about using in another doses or something. But for children, it's not only another indication, so indications that are usually for adults, but also another dosing and different dosing. And so my question is, knowing that investing in children brings more quality because these are younger population, why are we doing so little for pediatric population, and are there regions or countries that have a special attention for this population? Thank you.
Does someone feel like to answer? I give it to the panel, of course. Maud.
I can answer going back to my example on the French initiative on genomics. There's a clear indication on pediatrics, meaning that different pediatric cancer are actually part of these French initiatives, and pediatric patients can have the molecular screening, the whole genome sequencing, etc. And then they can be oriented, of course, to clinical studies whenever they have a specific genomic alterations. However, I think your questions are mainly related to the fact, do we have the right, or at least can use off-label drugs on specific patients? And the pediatric patient is actually a tricky question, because this is something that we need to validate. We know today that we have a lot of clinical studies, and it's been more than 15 years where we have precision medicine platform studies to see if based on a specific biomarker, actually we can do better. We know that we can do better, but the question of off-label drugs is really tricky. We need to validate that. So if the percentage is high, for me, it's a bit expected, because we really need to be to collect the maximum evidence before giving a specific drug to a pediatric patients.
Thank you so much. I worry we have to close, but I think the panel is still there tomorrow, this evening. Please exchange. We are having, as you saw, quite long breaks. It is there that you talk, that you exchange, that you maybe start new collaboration cross-border. Who knows? In terms of equity, I would like to underline, we should not, we should think about everyone, independent on where they are living, independent of they are young or if they are old. So don't forget to develop treatments also for elderly people. For people at different stages in their life, different ages, not to talk specifically because I am, but about women in their different stages. I think in a lot of clinical trials, they are avoided because they are too complex. Maybe they're in general, well, we don't open the discussion. So I think this is something where we still have to work on, but I'm very convinced that working cross-border and having excellent experts from different disciplines, with their specific role in their discipline. Together we can push the pipeline from the need to from the research then to the innovation implementation nationally and global. And I would like really to thank you for your great talks, for the discussions, and for you being with us until now. And I hand over, well, first a great applause please to the panel.